Chapter 17, Getting Paid. One of the biggest drawbacks of being your own boss is you no longer collect a paycheck at the end of the week. Instead, unless you run a cash business, you are likely to have to wait weeks or even months to collect for work you've done or products you've delivered. Sometimes such delays are unavoidable. It may be standard price for a particular company or more of the companies in a particular industry to take 60 to 90 days or longer to pay. Other times, though, your customers will lower give your bills low priority because money is tight or because you are a small business and unlikely to damage their credit rating or be much of a pest if they pay you late or don't pay you at all. Regardless of the circumstances, unusual or unexpected delay in payment can put a crimp into your business and gray hairs on your head, particularly if you have a payroll to meet or a family to feed, clothe, and shelter. The strategies in this chapter should help you avoid some common collection pitfalls. How long could it take to collect from customers? If you don't get paid at the time products or services are delivered, it can take anywhere from a few weeks to 90 days or more to collect on your invoices. While some companies pay within 10 to 30 days of delivery of work or a product, it is not unusual for payment to take 45 to 60 days from the time your invoice reaches your customers. In some industries or with some individual companies, you can expect to wait 90 days or more for payment. When should I consider a payment late? Consider a payment late if it does not arrive within about 10 days of the time you would normally expect it to arrive. For instance, if a business normally pays in 30 days, you should have payment in hand within 40 days of the date you mail the invoice. What should I do if I don't get paid on time? If you sell to businesses, call your contacts at the company and make sure they got your invoice and that the invoice have been signed off and forwarded to the accounting department for payment. If you sell to customers, send out a friendly reminder asking if the customer has misplaced or overlooked the bill. What should I do if the customer says they never received the invoice or that they mailed the check? Although there are some businesses that will use such ploys to delay payment, occasionally invoices, checks, and mail do get lost or misplaced. As long as the loss is an isolated incident, the best thing to do is give the client the benefit of the doubt. Send a new invoice if the client tells you the invoice has been lost. If accounting says the check has been cut, ask them to see when it was mailed. If the company is local and more than a week has elapsed since the check was supposedly mailed, ask them to put a stop payment on the old check and issue a new one. If you suspect the company is not being honest about mailing the check, tell them you will stop by in person and pick it up. What can be done to speed collection? In some type businesses, there may be nothing you can do except to plan ahead for the delay in payment. This one reason accountants and experienced business owners warn neophytes not to quit a job to start a business unless they have and can raise enough cash to cover business and living expenses for up to 6 to 12 months. But for many businesses, one or more of these suggestions may help. Discuss payment terms before the work is done. Be sure you and the customer are each clear about when payment will be expected. Ask who should get your invoice when the work is done. It may or may not be the person who assigns you work. If your invoice is misdirected, payment is likely to be delayed. Put everything in writing. If you don't have a formal contract with your customers, summarize details of any verbal discussion in a letter, commonly called a letter of agreement, and send it to the customer. The letter should include enough details and prices, delivery, and payment to avoid disputes later on about your fee, what you are supposed to do for that fee, when you are supposed to do it, and when and how much you should be paid. If the customer has the right to accept or reject work, make sure any contracts or letters of agreement specify a time frame within which the customer must make that decision. If you don't, the customer could hang on to your work or delay payment for months just by neither accepting nor rejecting what you've delivered. Consider retainer arrangement with some or all of your customers if it is a customary in your field. These can be set up on a peer job basis or on a long-term basis. If the retainer gives a customer a certain number of hours of your time each week or month, make sure the contract is worded so that your customer can't save up, carry on unused time. Otherwise, you can get stuck with two or more customers, each demanding at the same time that you make good on the time you owe them and do their projects immediately despite other commitments you have made. Get part of all your money up front. If you can't get the entire fee in advance, arrange for progress payments for the balance. Set up the arrangement so you have covered all costs and at least some of your profit before you finish a job or deliver the final product. That way, if the company stalls, loses the invoice for your final payment, runs into a cash flow problem of its own, or decides not to pay you for any reason, the loss will be minimal. Dirty trick warnings. From time to time, you will run into a business that has no intention of paying fair with small business vendors. Such businesses are often surprisingly large and regularly chisel vendors or subcontractors out of anything from a few dollars here and there to a few $100s, knowing full well the small vendor won't do much more than raise an eyebrow or kick a tire because the amount is too small to be worth pursuing legally, or their business is too important for the small vendor to jeopardize by insisting on full payment. If you run into one of these businesses, you basically have three choices: make a fuss and risk losing the client, waste your time and money going to court and later trying to collect on any judgment you are awarded, swallow pride, your tongue, and a little gall, and accept the lower fee as yet another cost of doing business. Unfortunately, the last option is usually the most practical from a purely business point of view, since it wastes the least amount of time and money, which is why the bigger companies knows it is likely to get away with its tactics. If you are working for a federal or a state government agency, or a prime contractor to a government agency, ask if they have a program to pay small businesses within 30 days. If they do, find out what you have to do to be part of that program. If you are working for the other business, consider offering a discount for payment within 10 days. A common discount is 2% for payment within 10 days. Dirty tricks warnings. If you offer to discount for early payment, you will find some companies will take the full 30 days or more to pay and then still take the discount. You can argue with them, insist on payment, and ignore the mistake. What you do will probably depend on whether or not you want to do business with the company in the future. Send out invoices as soon as jobs are finished. The sooner your invoices go out, the sooner they are likely to be paid. If you deal with businesses that run payables only once or twice a month, and your invoice reaches accounting the day after the company ran payables, your invoice could take 15 to 30 days longer than it should have to get paid. Look into the possibility of getting merchant status and accepting credit cards. If you are approved, depending on your agreement with the company, you will usually get paid by the credit card company within 2 days to 2 weeks. Decide based on industry norm and your experience with individual vendors how long it should take to get paid. Anytime you do not receive payment within the time limit you set, send out a reminder or overdue notice immediately. Follow up with the repeat notices at regular intervals until you get paid. The longer you wait to collect on late accounts, the harder it may be to collect. Be persistent. If you have trouble collecting, the adage about the sneaky wheel getting the grease, the sneaky wheel gets the grease, holds just as true for collecting from accounts as it does for other situations. If possible, don't start a new job for a company until you get paid for the previous one. If you sell to businesses and have a computer or a modem, consider checking the credit rating of potential business clients by searching the TRW Business Credit Profile available on Dialog and through Getaways to Dialog from Genie and other computer online information systems. The TRW Business Credit Profile contains more than 2.5 million companies listings and can be searched quickly by entering a company name and, if desired, city and state information. If there are any matches for your search, you will get a list of companies that match search terms you keyed in. If the company you want information about is on the list, you can get a full credit report displayed immediately on your screen. This report will contain, if known, the company name, address, sales, employees, ownership, credit history, and the number of credit inquiries made in the past 9 months. What does it cost to get a business credit report online? You pay the regular hourly service charge, $6 an hour during non-prime time on Genie at modem speeds up to 2400 baud, plus a surcharge for the use of the TRW credit reports. The surcharges are as follows. Non-hit search is $1.25. Initial company search is $7.50. Full company record is $29. No matches for your search terms found. Each set up of 5 company names. Since the search and the retrieval can be done in just a few minutes, the cost for getting a business credit record this way can be under $40. I've done a lot of work for a company that always seems pleased with my work and pays on time. Now they are more than 2 months late paying me and won't return my phone calls. Could it be that they were displeased with the last 2 projects I did for them? When a customer who appears to be pleased with your work stops paying on time and won't talk to you about the problem, there is good reason to suspect the company is having a cash flow problem and that the missing payments are a result of their cash crunch, not the quality of your work. What can I do to get them to pay me? This is always a difficult situation for small businesses. For a very small business. On one hand, if the customer is big and has provided a lot of business in the past, you may not want to lose their future business. Thus, you may not want to be too aggressive in your collection efforts. On the other hand, you can stay in business if you don't get paid for your work in a reasonable amount of time. If you are a freelancer or a very small business, very late payments for your job for just 1 or 2 large jobs can affect your ability to pay your own bills if you don't have much spare cash. Therefore, the first thing you should have to do is decide whether you want to keep this customer business and if the business is worth keeping. If you sell to businesses rather than consumers, one thing may help you decide if a customer business is worth keeping is to talk to other business owners who sell to the same company. Find out what their experiences have been with the company. Trade or business associates are a good place to make such contacts. If you start hearing things like they do that to everybody, or if you learn several other suppliers have stopped doing business with the company, you may well want to consider crossing the company off your customer list. Networking with other business owners can also help you avoid losses and payment delays by alerting you in advance to companies that are known to be slow or late payers. If the business is worth keeping, about the best you can do is send statements while polite reminders of unpaid bill each month and continue to try reach your contact at the company. If you do succeed in reaching your contact, try to find out the reason for the holdup. If the company is having cash flow problems, suggest they pay you part of your outstanding balance every 2 weeks until the invoice is paid. If you don't want to deal with the customer in the future, send a series of firm but not threatening collection letters. Phone call reminders may also help pry money loose from the company. If the company doesn't respond to your letters or calls, you might consider suing them in small claims court if the amount involved is within the limit set in your region. Occasionally, you will find that a company will pay what it owes shortly before the day they are told to appear in court. You have to be careful that you don't say anything that could be considered libelous or slanderous by the client company. For instance, you don't want to imply the company is about to go bankrupt or never pays its bills to anyone. You could mention the company seems to be taking a long time paying you and ask others if they know how the company usually takes and or what their experiences with that company has been. What should I do if the customers keep calling me but isn't paying? Basically, you should have 4 choices. Thank them for thinking of you, but tell them you can't ship merchandise or start new projects for them until they pay part of all of what they owe you. Refuse to do business with them at all. Ship goods on a COD basis or get upfront payment for services, cash on delivery. Take the order or the job and add it to their bill and risk having their cash flow problem become your problem. I don't want to be bothered going to court because the amount of time it would take. Would it do any good to just send a letter telling the company I'll sue you if they don't pay? No, you can't do that. Threatening to sue a company or a consumer when you have no intention of doing so could cause you to be sued yourself. If you are unsure what you can and can't do legally to legally collect from your customer, ask an attorney for advice. For a relatively small fee, you could save yourself a bundle if the advice prevents you from getting sued or help you collect debts. Should I sue if I can't sue in small claims court? Should I sue if I can't sue in small claims court? That's another sticky situation for very small businesses. Unfortunately, in some cases, despite the loss of income, the most practical thing to do is accept the loss and go about your business. Unless the company owes you a lot of money and you could recoup your costs of suing, legal and court costs, and the time you have to devote to the lawsuit make it impractical for you to sue. Your best bet in a situation like this is to ask your attorney for advice and consider all possible outcomes before making your decision. Remember too, that should you win and your customer can't pay, your victory will be a very expensive one. A company claims I didn't do part of the job, so they aren't going to pay me. What can I do? The first thing you should do is to sit down and talk to your contact at the company, determine the cause of misunderstanding. If you had a contract to perform the work, ask them to pinpoint how the company thinks you failed to live up to your responsibilities. If the problem revolves around a misunderstanding over items in the contract or over the nature of the work being delivered, see if you can work out an equitable solution. If not, discuss whether the company might make partial payment. If you are willing to accept partial payment in settlement of the contract, if you can't work out with your differences, you will have to sue the company if you want to collect the money you are owed. If the amount is larger than the maximum claimed allowed in small claims court, the cost of your legal fees might make the lawsuit impractical to pursue. Thus, if you can reach any kind of compromise with the company, you are likely to come out ahead. You will also learn, albeit the hard way, to make sure your contracts let the customers know exactly what you will and won't do for your fee. Do I have a do I have to have a written contract with customers to get paid? Under certain understand under something known as the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC, contracts for the sale of goods worth $500 or more must be in writing to be legally enforceable. Items you can move or ship are generally considered goods. Although personal services and goods under the $500 value are not covered by the law, it is also a good idea to get contracts in writing. Without a written document, there is generally no way to prove whose version is correct if a dispute arises. How should I go about notifying people that their account is past due? It would be a good idea to develop a series of letters notifying the customer of the past due amount and requesting payment. Each of these letters should be slightly more emphatic than the previous one about the importance of paying the past due amount now. If you send out computer generated statements, the reminder could be printed directly on the statement instead of being mailed out as a separate letter. If you use multi-part forms and alternatives to form letters, an alternative to a form letter might be to put a sticker saying essentially the same thing as the form letter on a copy of the original bill and mail it to the customer. Still, another alternative, a little less friendly, is to send the customer a copy of the original bill and using rubber stamp mark it past due. Are there any regulations about what I can do and can't do to collect bills? The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act set down a number of guidelines governing the collection of consumer debt by third-party billing collectors. While the provisions of the Act may not apply to you unless you retain a collection agency to collect outstanding consumer bills, you would still be wise to abide by the provisions of the Act. Among the actions you should avoid are making threats, using harassing or abusive language, accusing the debtor of being a liar or a deadbeat, making the debtor name known publicly, reporting late or defaulted payment to credit bureau is not illegal, however. Making false, misleading, or deceptive statements about what would have happened if the debtor doesn't pay, such as saying you will sue if you have no intention of doing so. Implying that the originator person who is requesting payment of a collection letter is an attorney, and if he or she is not, making a collection letter look like a telegraph, implying that the debtor has committed a crime, making dunning calls more frequently than once a week, making calls at very early or very late hours after 8 p.m. is considered very late for dunning calls in some states. Calling a customer who is a debtor at work if his or her employer forbids it. What should I say in the past? What should I say in past due notices? The first reminder should be very polite, suggesting the customer has merely forgotten or misplaced the bill. The tone should be friendly and indicate you assume the customer will pay immediately now that he or she has been reminded. It might read something like this. Dear Mr. Southard, bills sometimes get misplaced or overlooked, and we have not yet received your payment for our invoice number 124, dated April 25th. Please check your records, and if payment has not gone out, mail a check today. If a check was recently mailed, please disregard this notice. Thank you for your attention to this matter. We appreciate your business. Sincerely. If you don't get payment within 2 weeks of sending the first reminder, send a second notice. The second notice should be worded a little more strongly than the first. In addition, it should also ask the customer to call you if there is any problem related to the bill. This may flush out customers who aren't paying because they dispute a charge or aren't satisfied, and those who might need to pay the bill in stages instead of all at once. Dear Mrs. Stewart, we have not yet received your payment of $230 for invoice number 124. That was mailed to you on April 25th. Would you please take a minute to check your records now and forward payment so we may bring your account up to date? If there is some problem with your bill that you would like to discuss with us, please don't hesitate to call. Thank you for your immediate attention to this matter. Sincerely, the third letter should be a little firmer. Dear Mr. Stewart, we still have not received your check for $230 for invoice number 1234, dated April 25th. Since you have not questioned previous statements, since you have not questioned previous statements, we assume our records are correct. To preserve your credit privilege, please forward us your check for $230 today so that we may bring your seriously overdue account up to date. If you cannot pay the full amount in this time, please call our main office to work out a payment method you can abide by. Thank you for your speedy cooperation in this matter. The fourth letter should simply specify what you will do if you do not receive payment by a specific date. You must be very careful not to make such letters threatening or misrepresent what you do. Don't say you will report the customer to credit bureaus or sue unless you plan on doing these things. And don't say or imply anything that could otherwise be construed as threatening. To be sure your collection letters don't violate any laws, it would be a good idea to have an attorney review and approve them. Here is a sample of what your fourth letter might look like. Dear Mr. Sutter, over the last 2 months, we have sent you several reminders about your overdue payment of $230 for invoice number 1234. At this time, your bill is still unpaid. Please remit your payment of $230 within 5 days to prevent further collection action. Sincerely, Can I send postcards instead of letters to alert people to past due accounts? No. By law, there can be no marks or visible indication referring to collection efforts on anything you put in the mail. If you use envelopes with see-through windows allowing the address to show through, make sure nothing about the late payment shows through the envelope window. How should I handle phone calls to collect money owed me? Collection phone calls should pretty much follow the procedure described for letters. The one thing you will do, however, is to make sure at the outset that you have reached the right individual. Even if the person's last name is unusual, you could have phoned the wrong person, particularly if you are looking up in their phone number in a telephone book. As noted in the list of collection practices to avoid, you should avoid making your calls at unusual hours. Does it pay to use collection agencies? Most people do not like to be contacted by collection agencies, and some will pay up when they see their account has been turned over to one for collection. Additionally, the agency may be more persistent and routine in its collection efforts than you are. However, a collection agency doesn't have any method available to it that you don't. They can't threaten, harass, or mislead the customers into paying the debt, and they have no legal means of forcing payment. Nothing short of a court order can force your customers to pay up. What do collection agencies charge? Collection agency fees range from 1/3 to 1/2 the amount collected. Be sure you know in advance all the fees you will be charged. For instance, will you have to pay a fee for each letter the agency mails on your behalf, or just give the agency a percentage of the amount collected? A customer owes me a lot of money, and it seems to have skipped town. Is there any way I can track this person down and collect? If the amount owed is sufficient, you might want to consider hiring a private investigator to do the search. My customer is from out of state. Where do I file the lawsuit? In most cases, you have to file suit for collection in the legal jurisdiction where the customer is located.